Thank you. He's an author, he's a gardener, he's a lecturer, he's everything that we love.
Tall.
Felder Russian.
You forgot to say tall and smart.
Oh, yes,
And
that
tall.
too.
Anyway, thanks y'all for coming. I know it's a really good weekend to be out good doing other stuff, and I hope when we get done with this, if you haven't spent time here in the Max, if you'll spend a little bit of time, if you look around, you might even see a bottle tree that came from my yard. I'm somebody, I keep telling y'all. And also, when you're done, be sure to go visit the farmer's market because they are precious. You know, we didn't have them 15, 20 years ago, so that's important. But anyway, we were talking about, what do y'all think we're going to talk about today? Gardening, sort of? What? Native plants was the topic. But at the same time, I'm going to weave a lot of stuff in there. But it's going to primarily emphasize native plants. And I think you'll be surprised at some stuff. First of all, I just want to mention what is a native plant. And the legal definition, the one that plant nerds go by, is anything that was here before Europeans started bringing stuff from all over the world. So anything before 1500 or so that was here, considered native. But keep in mind that what's now southeast United States, there used to be one big continent called Pangaea. I'm not making this up. We got fossils. Pangaea was one big continent. And when it split apart and started drifting apart, they had eruptions and mountain ranges and all like that. But bottom line is, what used to be Southeast Asia now was next door to Southeast United States now. And if you go to China, you'll find native dogwoods, native hollies, native ferns, native magnolias. All these plants that we're familiar with from Asia are closely related to the ones that are here. They just have slight differences. And I'll show you a couple of examples that'll surprise you. So native plants, technically anything here before people started bringing stuff from all over the world. Two other terms. One is wildflower, and that means any kind of native plant that spreads. It becomes wild. Okay, there could be a native wildflower, or it could be something that came from overseas and spread from there and became a wildflower. See, so there's native and there's naturalized, which means it's not from here, but it got used to it real quick. Okay, so we're okay with that. The reason I'm saying all this is because native plant people, and I'm past president of the Native Plant Society, they get their shorts in a knot real quick over technical stuff, like what's native, what's a weed. And they say that a plant that's, let's say, comes from Asia or Africa or South America and it spreads, it's an invasive exotic. Okay? Well, they don't admit that some of our own native plants are really invasive. Anybody ever have to try to get rid of poison ivy? You know, anybody have to pull up oaks from your garden? Well, those are native. Well, they say, well, if it's native, it can't be invasive. I'm sticking with the definition, taking over a place next door. Okay? So native plants, non-native plants, invasive, exotic, doesn't matter to me. We're talking about plants that are part of the fabric of Mississippi that we're used to, that have benefits. And here's the reason why I like native plants. Y'all know what this is, anybody? It's a native Buckeye tree. It's blooming out in the woods right now. Some of you may have it in your yard. If you put it out in the sun, it's going to die because it's a woodland plant, not from Texas. It grows in the woods. And when it blooms with these flowers, it starts blooming in March. And the ones that are here start blooming in March. And then when they drop their flowers, in Tennessee they're blooming. And then in Kentucky and Ohio. The reason I'm saying that, because hummingbirds, which are a native little bird, they go south for the winter. But in the spring when they start coming back, they need food and energy. This is one of their main plants. So they show up on our coast just about when our buckeyes bloom in the woods. And as it blooms further north, they follow the buckeyes all the way up into Canada. See? So this is an important thing because hummingbirds need the food. And it's out there for them. That's the way it works. So if you don't have this, hummingbird's going to blow right past your yard. And if you have this, if you have the only buckeye in town, you might not see any hummingbirds because they're up there, they may not see it. But if more people planted buckeyes, we'd have more hummingbirds, and maybe we could keep them here instead of sending them to Pennsylvania. See, so that's one of the reasons why an important reason for using native plants and wildflowers, because little subtle things like that are what keep our wildlife going. Okay? Any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. Any of y'all have a Buckeye? Does yours make the big old seeds? When this thing, it'll make look like a little leather, like a half deflated soccer ball, made a football, and each one has got a seed about, I'm going to say about that big seed. They're called Buckeyes because they look like the eye of a deer. They're big. You can take a Buckeye seed, when they start falling in September, you can take one and put it in a pot, and it will be this tall before fall. And it'll be this tall the next year it'll be bloom. From dropping on the ground to flowering, a year and a half. See, and they're really, have you grown in from seed? Yeah, they drop seeds and they say, woohoo, and they take it from there. That's what native plants do. Now, if it gets over in your flower garden, it's an invasive weed. And we'll touch on that a little bit. If you're interested in this, I do a lot of stuff online. I send people stuff. If you want a list of what are the best roses from Mississippi, or the best daffodils, or the best fruit plants, I've got all that. But I've got one called Native Plants and Wildflowers for Southern Gardens. You can print it out, but it looks like this when you print it out. Basically, it's just got benefits of natives, the naturalistic design, annual wildflowers, natives for shady places. These are things that hardy native shrubs, native trees, vigorous native vines. This is something I put together for people of Mississippi or the South, and it's free. If you'll send me an email, have any of y'all ever emailed me for my brochures? I send them out every day. I send dozens. Yeah, have you? So if you just email me and say native plants, I'll turn it right around and send it. And then if you wanted to print it out, it'd print out like this. Anyway, my email, go to my blog, not online. Not a website, but Felder Rushing blog. And it has a thing that says email me. Just click it, take it from there. Any questions about that? So if you want lists of good plants, the stuff I'm about to show you, I got it right here. So with that, I'm going to just jump right in. We've got we're not going to be here all morning, but I do have some area I want to cover. And by the way, Jesse, I appreciate your hard work. He is the guru here for making people sound tall and smart. And we appreciate him a whole lot. I want to start out by mentioning what the word garden is, because we don't live in the woods or in the meadow or in the fields or the forest. We live in a guarded area. That's what we call our yard, which is slang for garden, which is slang for a guarded area. So whether it's your yard or your town or your state or whatever, it's a feeling of enclosure and that we're doing something on purpose. We're doing it on purpose. We're not just letting things go crazy and random. I don't cut my hair, but I do shave, and I shape this up. That's the idea of gardening. You don't just let things go crazy. You have a little bit of control, because in gardening is a human thing. Turn this on, Felder. Here we go. And I'm not going to get into a lot of weird stuff, although I want to real bad. I've got my minor's in psychology, and I want really bad to talk about the weird stuff that we do and why we do it. But it's weird enough, I don't have to explain a lot. We're going to touch on some of that, though. I write for a living. I lecture for a living. I've got 30-something books. I write syndicated newspaper columns and magazines and all like that. But none of that is, now that I'm retired, I do it because I want to. I try to get information out, but I don't want to go into all the details, the bells and whistles. The extension service. I'm retired extension. I can make your eyes bleed with stupid detail about stuff. But that's not important. Getting the idea out is important. And I like to keep things, when I'm in Mississippi. And if I'm giving a lecture in England, I show pictures from England. If I'm in Texas, I use Texas pictures. But I was born up and raised up in Indianola along they call it a bayou. I call it a leech-filled hellhole. It's got snakes and alligators and all sorts of stuff out there. But I was raised thinking that this is normal. That's duckweed, and it's got eels, and it's got little shrimp, it's got gars and alligator turtles and all like that. So I was raised right at the edge of an ecosystem that is hard to replicate anywhere on Earth. My great-grandmother was a horticulturist. When I was 10 years old, she was old and I was a kid. She called me Little Professor, because I used to follow her around and look at the stuff. This is a picture of her giving a talk on growing herbs back in the 1940s to a gardening club. See, so I was raised by somebody who knew too much and didn't have anybody to tell it to. Nobody cared, and she spilled it out onto me. And so that's sort of when I got stuck. She was a garden club lady, but she wasn't into blue ribbons. She was a horticulture chair. She wasn't president or vice president. She was always a horticulture chair because she didn't get along well with other people. She wasn't nice enough to be one of the tea ladies, okay? She told me one time, if you want to get a blue ribbon, it's not what you know, it's not how well you do something, it's how well you figure out ahead of time what the judges are looking for and jump through their hoops. So she said, it's worth doing, but it may not be what's satisfying to you, satisfy yourself. She used to write about plants from her youth. And that's my great-grandmother. And in one of her journals in 1914, she wrote of her visit to her grandmother's garden and what she remembered from her childhood. And she wrote stuff like, she remembered the Tradescantia. Anybody know what Tradescantia is? That grew on either side of the front gate, remembered because my mother, all dressed up to go to church one day, and following the custom of the day, carried a bouquet of flowers in her hand. Because, they didn't have deodorant. They carried sweet smelling stuff. But of all of her journals, the only picture that she actually ever colored in was this one right here. And you may know Tradescantia, which is named after one of England's most important plant explorers, a guy named John Tradescant. Right across River Thames from Big Ben is a History of Gardening Museum. You got the Tradescant Garden. Of all the plants he did, one was named after him, is what we call spiderwort. Have y'all got this in your yard? Ever try to get rid of it? A Roundup just burns it down. It comes right back up. It grows along the interstate. It grows in shade. It grows in shade. It doesn't care what kind of dirt you've got. It grows from Canada to Florida. Tradescantia, named after this guy. Anyway, it's a terrific native plant, but it just tends to spread, and people don't want it because it spreads. I'm thinking it's a wildflower. It's supposed to spread. It was spreading before we invented the word spread. Anyway, here's what she remembered. Her mother carried a bouquet of roses, and she said among the red roses were the delicate blue Tradescantia with their long, bright green streams of leaves. So she remembered not the fact that it was really kind of weedy or that rose was eaten up with black spot. She remembered that combination of two plants, wildflowers and native plants, and she called it a Rumpelstiltskin thing. Y'all remember Rumpelstiltskin? Wove golden garments out of what? Common straw. Weaving golden garments out of common straw. And isn't that what we're trying to do in our gardens? And using native plants, even the weedy ones, and even not so great old imported plants, the combination is what works. It's what works. And by the way, you can get Tradescantia in at least 11 different colors. They got hybrids of it that are prettier and sturdier, more compact and longer blooming than a native plant. See, so we take native plants and can even improve on them for gardens. See, so I can have this plant without it being quite so weedy. Same plant. Any questions on that? Spider wart, W-O-R-T. Wart, by the way, means plant, and it looks sort of like spider. John Tradescant, S-C-A-N-T, Tradescant. Tradescantia virginiana. I just want to let y'all know I can do this if I need to. Do I need to do that kind of stuff? I don't think so. I was so inspired in doing that kind of stuff that in 1980-something, we're talking about a long time ago, our state, you know how they put out a map of the state, the road map every year? One year they did, the state road map had Mississippi wildflowers. I took every picture in there. So I've been doing this a long time, and I wasn't looking for the weedy ones. I was looking for things that make a pretty picture, because I'm a gardener, and I want things that look good, okay, not just things that seem like they're good, that have some benefit. And again, I'm not going to get into a lot of details about here's how you add soil, or the fact if you take a dogwood from a garden center and put it in your yard, any of y'all ever planted a dogwood and it died? You know, Southern Living says 2 out of every 3 dogwoods planted this year are not going to be here 5 years from now. They have a really low survival rate when they're put in the yard, even though they're all out in the woods. And there's a simple reason. Dogwoods out in the woods have roots that stick out like this, and they don't grow very well. They're really scraggly roots. But there's this stuff, it's not a fungus, but it's called Mycorrhizae, and it grows on the end of the roots, and it extends the roots like 20 times. It's a root extender. And it's out in the woods, but it's not in your yard, and it's not in potting soil. So if you take a dogwood and put it in your yard, it doesn't have the mycorrhizae. It's going to struggle. But if you go out in the woods and find a good dogwood out there that's growing well and dig a little of that dirt in and mix it with your dirt, you've inoculated with this stuff that helps the dogwood grow. That's a stupid thing, but it's the truth. As simple as that. So I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff. I'm not going to talk about doing things over and over and over because we have to, like myth of Sisyphus, the guy that was doomed to roll a rock up the hill and it rolls back down and rolls a rock, eternal, ceaseless toil. That's gardening. We're not going to talk about actually gardening today. We're going to talk about the plants that go with gardens. By the way, that's part of my trilogy. I have 3 things that I've tried to do in my life. One is good plants, planted well, and the kind of people who do it. See, so this is about pass along plants, the kind of plants that everybody has and nobody bought. You got it from Aunt Mamie, she got it from somebody, got it from somebody. Slow gardening is about just the way people garden. There's only 2 rules for planting. The three things to know to plant something. Dig a hole, put something in that green side up, water it a time or 2. That works. Now, if you want to grow more plants, you got to start doing more stuff. But if you've ever seen plants growing up on Rose Hill in the cemetery up there, they dug a hole, they put it in there, they watered it once, it's still there. See, so if you choose good plants and plant them well, they'll take care of themselves. And as far as the type of people to plant, I'll touch on that in a bit. Anyway, not going to get into that. I will mention this, though, philosophically. I saw this outside a church in Port Gibson, and I'm thinking, if they got nothing to say, I got nothing to say. Because horticulturists will make you feel stupid. Any master gardeners here? Any of y'all master gardeners? Because master gardeners will make you feel stupid because they were trained in science, not gardening. And they say you got to do this and this and this and this and this, and you don't. You know that. You know that. Only example I'll give is composting. Any of y'all composters? Yeah. Well, I found out that, first of all, worldwide, you can go to England, Japan, South, anywhere you go in the world, they're going to have 2 bins. They can have one that they're filling up, and when it's full, they start filling the other one up. By the time it's full, they're digging out of here. So they're filling and using. That's being used, that's being filled. Look, there's some old tomatoes sprouting there. So all they do is they just fill it, working and using, back and forth. And all they do is pile stuff up. There's books written on composting, thermophilic bacteria, and bioactivation, and carbon nitrogen ratio, and all that stuff. It's just a leaf pile. It's just a leaf pile. If you want to speed it up, there's rules. But if you just have a leaf pile, it composts, like out in the woods. You don't see leaves this deep out in the woods. They fall, and by next summer, they're gone because they compost themselves. See? So anyway, that's my approach. 2 rules for composting. Stop throwing that stuff away. Pile it up somewhere. If you want to make it neat, that's what a bin is for. If you want to speed it up, then we can call the master gardeners. But a lot of people don't compost because they think you got to do all that stuff, and you don't. You just don't. So that's my approach. My job is to throw out ideas, sowing seeds, Johnny Appleseed type of thing. And I'm going to sow a few today. I want to mention that there are a lot of good resources here in Mississippi. The Extension Service, the website for MSU is MSU CARES, C-A-R-E-S. It means Coordinated Access, Research, and Education, something like that. MSUcares.com. In the search box, click in wildflowers or lawns or vegetables or fruits, and it'll take you to stuff written by Mississippians for Mississippians. So no matter what it is you want, I'm talking about the past 8 or 10 years, it's gotten excellent. And there's even landscapes on people who have low wet areas, how you can plant stuff that like low wet areas. They call it a rain garden, see? Or if you've got a hot, dry area, if you're having trouble with grass. So there's good local information on all this. Also, the Natural Science Museum in Jackson has got a real nice little brochure they send out. They've got good resource people. And they do a lot of tours. This is the kind of tour that they just, by the way, any of y'all ever remember Dr. Dirt from our radio program? Host for a long time. That was Dirt. And we were on a native plant. He said, they just walk around looking at weeds, Felder. Yeah, but they were studying cool weeds you can't buy in a garden center. This is just an example of a naturalist showing people about all the kind of things that grow out in the savannas, out in the light shade. So there's resources, what I'm saying. So don't worry, about not knowing anything, not knowing where to get it. Now, one of the things I know is native plant people tend to froth at the mouth. They use all these fancy terms and stuff, and it can be daunting. They know a lot of stuff, but they have a hard time getting it across to people. Okay? That's what I'm going to try to do today. I'm going to try to break it down into not so much native plants as just good plants. Good plants. It's like this thing. What do y'all see here? Okay, who saw the flag first? Who saw the cups first? Two different approaches, left brain and right brain. One is process, one is product. And it's both. See, so a garden is a product, but it's part of an ongoing process. Can you arrange those and do something else? Sure you can. That's the process, and that's the materials. But can we agree that a flag is a symbol no matter what it's made out of? Whether it's flying in the wind or like this? Well, if you can agree on that, then we're on the same page. We're going to take it from there. What is this? A magnolia. Who saw that first? Or who saw? See, product. But the whole point is you can look at things all different ways, and as long as we're on the same page, it's okay. This is a real magnolia. Let me back it up there. That doesn't look bad. But the problem is, a real magnolia, when you put it in your yard, what happens? It gets really big. And it drops all those leaves on the ground, which a lot of people find offensive. But if you think about it, magnolias, we have fossil records of magnolias. Whatever killed the dinosaurs couldn't kill magnolias. They've been dropping leaves on the ground for a reason. It's their reason, may not be our reason, for millions of years, let's say thousands of years. We'll play it safe. They've been dropping leaves on the ground. It's part of being a magnolia. And when we drop on the ground and we say, oh, there's leaves on the ground, we got to rake them up. That's us. It's not the magnolia, see? So if we can understand that a lot of stuff happens for a reason, it helps you relax a little bit. And if your neighbors find a problem with that, put a little sign out there, warning, magnolia leaf fall area. And they'll look at it and they'll cut you some slack. See? So it's a matter of interpreting stuff. A lot of people don't like our magnolia tree, our state flower, and our state tree because it gets too big. There's one called Little Jim. Have any of y'all heard of it? This is as big as a flower gets. Look, here's a Little Jim magnolia growing in Delaware in a pot. See, so you can have our state tree, our state flower, our magnolia in a small space by knowing that word cultivar. Like the different types of spiderwort, there's different type of magnolias. So I'm trying to sort of set that up. Now, there are a lot of plants, if you read about them, they say don't plant this because it's a weed. This is an example. This is called purple loosestrife or lythrum. Every publication on earth says don't plant it, it's invasive. Have y'all ever heard of this plant? Okay, the problem is it doesn't even grow in Mississippi. So if you put it in your yard, it can be a really pretty plant, but it can't spread because it won't grow very long here. So you can grow it as a garden plant here without it taking over the woods. See, so all of a sudden I'm at odds with the people say don't do this. Well, because I'm thinking don't do this if there's a reason to not do it. And some invasive plants can be really seriously problem. I'll give you an example. Oh, by the way, this is what master gardeners will tell you. Weed is planted out of place. If an oak tree, which is a shade tree, full of acorns and all these, everything that survives on, if it grows up in the crack of a sidewalk, it's a weed. See, all of a sudden where it is makes it a problem. To no fault of its own. We decide it's a weed and it has to go. If a corn field has a rose come up in the middle of it, farmer's going to cut it down because it's a weed. See, so a weed is a matter of perspective. Am I going too far on this? Okay, y'all understand. Well, what about this? Dandelions. Is it a weed? What if I were to tell you it's introduced to North America because it's a main edible green food plant? Come on in, y'all. It is a main source of food. It's a salad green in Europe. They eat it. They make a drink out of the roots. It's like chicory. It's a terrific plant. It is right now covered with honeybees and butterflies. It is a terrific, terrific plant that's a perennial. It comes back. It has great little flowers. You can eat the leaves. Everything about it is good. It stays low. And when you start mowing your grass, it disappears. It grows over the wintertime, blooms in the spring. And when you cut it down, it's gone for the year. See, so you can have dandelions in your lawn right now and have a lawn in the summertime. We call it a weed because we're taught that it was a weed, because it's in the wrong place. Well, what would daffodils be if they spread? If you have daffodils coming up all over your lawn, will they be weeds or not? Even though they're, let me get this straight. They come up in the fall, they have yellow flower in the spring, they die down in the summer. Same parameters as a dandelion. But we call daffodils, which are from Asia, weeds, desirable. We call dandelions from Europe weeds because we didn't plant them. Matter of perspective, see, that's all I'm saying. If you look at them through that deconstructionism, it makes a lot of sense. Who knows what this is the flower of? I'll give you a hint, it smells like cheap grape bubble gum. This is the flower of kudzu. It's a beautiful flower, but what's the problem with it? It takes over. It'll wrap you up. It'll wrap up your pickup truck while you go into the Sonic. This is what kudzu does. But look at that. That's a pretty flower. And all that, it smells good, and it's edible. Perfectly edible. They serve it in salads at the governor's mansion. See? So all of a sudden, yeah, it has some value, but the downside is too much. See? So that's where we start saying, is it a good weed or a bad weed? It's a matter of perspective. This dandelion, which you can grow in a pot and eat it, is tougher than lettuce and just as nutritious. It's kind of bitter tasting, but that's what vinaigrette is for. See? So you go to, I took this picture, by the way, at Colonial Williamsburg, because it's always been cultivated as a wintertime food. Before we had lettuces and mesclun and all those pretty things. So if you want to grow it as a pretty flower plant that you can eat when you're tired of looking at it, that's also good for butterflies and bees, all of a sudden, is it a weed? And honeysuckle in England, pots with honeysuckle and a stick and granite like that, $75. In England, it's going to cost you 20 pounds, which is like $20. They sell it where it's not a weed because it's such a beautiful plant. And when my daughter was little, she got tattoos and she got ink and all this. I love her to death, and she's sweet and she's smart and she's popular. But when she was a kid, she was eating that sweet little stuff. She pulled it that little bit and put that tiny piece of pure, raw, sweet nectar on the tip of her tongue. And I know it's a weed. I know it's invasive. I know it gets out in the woods. But I will always grow honeysuckle for my daughter because it reminds her, no matter how old she is or where she goes or what kind of person she is, for the rest of her life, every time she smells or tastes honeysuckle, she can think about me and being back in Mississippi. See? So it's worth it to have a little piece in my yard here and there. If it comes over there, I pull it up. But I leave a little bit over here. So here's the new definition. It's a weed is out of place to you. But if I have dandelion in my lawn, I call it a pollinator plant. And it's not a weed. If it gets in my neighbor's yard, they can do whatever they want to. It's a slippery slope is what I'm saying, how you define this kind of thing. To me, this is the most appropriate thing. If it's causing you problems, whether it's from here or Asia or any place, if it's causing you problems, do something about it. If it's not causing a problem, just relax. Okay? Because the truth is, some of my neighbors irritate me more than their plants. I mean, you can apply this all sorts of stuff. And I don't want to get political here, but before the 1500s, you know what the Choctaws and the Cherokees used to call this whole part of the country? Ours. And we ate up all their stuff and made them walk to Oklahoma, and we're going to talk about invasive species. The Cherokees think, what the heck? Y'all need to go home, and we want our place back. See, so you have to keep things in perspective about, whether something is destroying everything or moving or changing things, or just being something we can use part of our life. This plant right here grows along every river in Mississippi. It's called river oats. It's about this tall. The grass is this thing. They look like little fish. It's a terrific native grass. It's pretty. It's easy. It grows in sun. It grows in shade. But I put one of those in my yard. It's got a great name, Chasmathium latifolia. And they said, it's a great plant. It's a native plant. I put it in my yard, and it is everywhere now. I cannot get rid of it. I have to pull it up all the time. And it's a great little native plant, but it's become a serious weed to me. See, so I have to, I used to say breathe in, breathe out, but I take Wellbutrin now. Wellbutrin helps a lot. Anyway, y'all get what I'm saying. Y'all hear what I'm saying. I don't want to get too much more into that. I will mention this, though. Kudzu will take over like crazy. But what about this stuff? Y'all know what this plant is right here? What's that? Is that orange daylily? This plant right here, orange daylily, of all the plants that I've studied, and I've studied plants on 5 continents, I look at plants that are everywhere, and the plant that I see irises everywhere, I see roses everywhere, you see tomatoes and peppers and rosemary, all these plants all over the world, but the plants that are shared between gardeners, pass along plants, the one that I see shared more often in more gardens across the world is this plant. This is the #1 pass along plant on earth. It's at Royal Botanic Garden at Kew. It's around the sign of the American Horticultural Society's headquarters. And the reason American Hort Society does it is because it's a comfort food plant. You look at it and say, fancy people grow that old thing, that common outhouse ditchbank lily, Yeah, because gardening is a big tent. And we want everybody to feel good. And if you don't know anything about Hemerocallis, the daylily, you plant one of these out here. My daughter would plant one. You put it on the ground and just scoot dirt up to it. It would grow. Okay? So it's a confidence builder. And get this, these don't grow from seed. Every one of these you see anywhere on earth came from another one, came from another one, came from another one, and all originated in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Eastern Asia. It's grown for over 3,000 years. It's food. Every part of this is edible. There's as much nutrition in a daylily bud as in broccoli. And we grow it as a flower, but it's food. And as you get hungry, you can eat daylilies. They taste like raw squash. You ever bite into a raw yellow squash? That's what they taste like. So for thousands of years, people have been sharing this all over the world, even though a lot of people say that's just a weed. It's not a weed unless it's along the ditch bank and it's causing you problems. See, it's a food plant with historic ties. And by the way, I'm not making any of this stuff up. A lot of it sounds outrageous. So anyway, here's my thing. May all your weeds be wildflowers. Now, this is the house I was raised in. This is my parents' house. That was my upbringing right there. We had an azalea, no plants, just splashy mud, a little a little metal sunflower, and nothing but grass to mow. Nothing but grass. And I had to do it. It was me. And it's got, if you look at it, that lawn looks okay, but if you look real close, it's got clover and stuff in it. That's when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I first learned about how itchy it is when you step on a honeybee and it itches. Anybody ever get a bee sting and the antihistamines that makes you itch? But I learned about stickers and about all this stuff. And when I said, when I get to be grown up, I'm not going to have any grass. And I don't. I'm a turf specialist. I wrote the forward to the book. Don't have a blade of grass in my yard because that's how I was raised. And that's not fun. It's not satisfying. You can't eat it. There's nothing about that was good, except I had to prune that thing every 3 or 4 years. This is what my yard looks like now. Oh, I used to have grass there. I got rid of it. Heck with that. Because I had to push it, and there wasn't enough room to mow, and then you had to stop. See, so I got rid of it. Now it's just paved over stuff. But I have a yard that's full of stuff now. This is what it looks like from the street. I can't live in some of your neighborhoods. There's places in Madison that won't let people like me live there. Because I put this fence because I don't want you to see into my guarded area. It's my little private space. But all these plants out here, these are native wildflowers. And I have butterflies and hummingbirds and lizards and all sorts of stuff. And my neighbor's out there with a lawnmower mowing a slope. You know, they tie a rope on it and mow this slope. I just said, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. So I put stuff out there. And then I put some rocks, and I needed some trees. So I made me some wooden trees. Just so the neighbors think I'm doing it on purpose, which I am. And by the way, mimosa, y'all know mimosa tree? It gets big, has those powder puff looking flowers. Those aren't flowers. Those are flamingo larvae. That's where flamingos come from. But get this, you know, if you let them go to flower, hummingbirds and bees just cover those flowers. They're important, even though they're not native. But then they make these beans, and the seeds come up everywhere, and you have mimosas everywhere. So what I do is my mimosa, when it gets bigger this summer, when it blooms, has the hummingbirds and the bees, as soon as it gets through blooming, I cut it to the ground in the summertime, and it sprouts back out. It looks like a giant fern. So by cutting it in the summertime, I got ferns the rest of the year, ferns the next year, flowers and butterflies, and I cut it down. So instead of cutting it in the wintertime, I cut it in the summer, and it keeps it from going to seed. Down the street, Susan, I don't think I've talked. By the way, this is my partner, Susan, from England. If people say, why you go to England, Felder? That thing right there. And after over 12 years of being together, she finally was allowed to come back to this country. It's been 2.5 years since she's allowed back here. Anyway, she cuts me a lot of slack because this is the house down the street from me. And they had wildflowers. And I love it when somebody bought the house, and the only way they could do this in their yard was because mine was so overblown, it made theirs look okay. You know, I took that bell curve and I stretched it way out over here so they could get away with wildflowers because when the people who bought this house, they were from Connecticut, and they bought the house, somebody said, the realtor said, and it's on the same street as Felder Rushing. But it's not too close. I'm not making this up. This is what they were told. Yoo-hoo! This is all the grass you need. Just say no to grass. I was raised in a city. Just say no to grass. You know, you can cut that with, you know, you can cut that and weed it and water it with a glass of wine in your hand. Okay. But my neighbor across the street, he flies a helicopter. Does he look happy? No. And what he does, you know, he lets it grow tall, which is the reason he doesn't have a lot of weeds in his yard, because he lets the grass get all the energy it needs. It gets nice and thick. If you cut your grass real close, you're going to have weeds because grass, Peter, it runs out of energy. You're starving to death. It's like putting a bird in a closet. See, but he lets it get tall, and then, oops, let me back up. Phooey. Come on, Felder. Come on, Felder, one more. There we go. He lets it grow tall and he mows it. That's all he does. He just mows it, but he mows it high. And so it has a nice, thick, healthy lawn like they do at the church and the cemetery without the irrigation and all that stuff. Anyway, this is the grass I had one year. I put it in a little red wagon and my Tiger Woods, and I did everything y'all do, except I did it with beer in one hand. Golf courses, there's something important about it. And I studied turf management at Mississippi State. I studied turf management. I work with golf courses. I work with soccer fields. I work with football fields. And I know what it takes to have a grass like that. A lot of input, a lot of effort, a lot. They mow it close, so they have to water. They have to fertilize. I'm leading up to something on all this, by the way. But notice this. They just have the putting green, and then they have the fairway, and then they have the rough with all this other stuff. Putting green, high maintenance, fairway, and then rough. Y'all got that idea? Here's where it all fits. This is a friend of mine named Jerry Palmer. He's a golf course manager, and in the rough, he grows wildflowers. They got the putting greens way back there. The fairway is just mowed, but he has wildflowers in the rough. And why not? You could have azaleas like they do in Augusta. If you have azaleas, but it has wildflowers because it's just a plant. And here's the deal. Here's where it all fits in. This thing called plant succession. You know, plants, if you were to walk away from your lawn in Texas, it would turn into desert because that's normal there. Grass is not. If you walk away from a lawn here, it's going to grow up, going to get weeds in it. And the weeds can have wildflowers in it. And which is fine. But if you leave it alone, it's going to get shrubs and then trees, and it's going to turn back into woods. Because that's where we live in the forest. The climax of plant succession here is woods. See, so if you want this is normal and natural, lowest maintenance. If you want this, you have to mow it all the time because you're trying to prevent plant succession. All flowers are that first little area, that first step towards woods for being a lawn. And that's where wildflowers fit in. You want more than just grass. You want lots of variety, but you want to keep it from going there. So here in Mississippi, a wildflower meadow has got to be taken care of like a fairway, not putting green, but fairway. You have to mow it at least once every year or two. That's what they do on the natural trace. They mow one side of the trace one year, they mow one side the next year. That way they have wildflowers along back and forth. So where wildflowers fit in is that first stage from lawn towards woods. Okay? Does this make sense? Now, you could do this if you want to. Neighbors are going to complain. That's a wildflower meadow. Does it work in town? Not really. It doesn't quite fit. It's good ecologically, but socially it's not so good. See, so if you want to grow with wildflowers in town, you got to figure out how to do it and not honk the neighbors off. You got to find out how to pull it off because you don't live out in the country. You live in town. See, luckily they're surrounded by all this pavement, but they've got an ecologically correct garden that's socially unacceptable, and it lowers the value of the neighbors. See, so we have to keep that in mind. Here's one of the things you can do. Have some grass, have some flower beds, and the flower beds happen to be native plants or wildflowers or other plants. All these. See, this is how you can pull it off. You can have a putting green up close to the house, a fairway that just gets mowed every now and then, and then wildflowers. That's where it fits in. See, and you can do that on small space. By the way, wildflowers by themselves don't look that great, but if you mix two or three together, you get that, flower design thing going. What they do in England, they just simply mow paths through it. And usually there'll be a bench over here, but they just simply mow paths through their stuff. And then the next year they mow a path in a different area. See, so it doesn't turn into woods. They just change the path around. Yes, sir?
What were the other flowers on the previous slide?
Our state flower is called Coreopsis. Coreopsis has got, black-eyed Susan is yellow with that little brown nose in it. Coreopsis is just all yellow. It'll start blooming pretty soon along the interstates. This is the type of Coreopsis, they call it field Coreopsis. It blooms later. But it's a Coreopsis tinctoria. Field Coreopsis. If you look at an old-fashioned name, it's Caleopsis. I don't know why. It's called Coreopsis. And it grows, once you start it, it comes up every year from seed. It's great to get started. But anyway, this is a way to manage them. Mow your path different times, see? And as long as you have a mowing area, people will think you're trying. They'll cut you some slack. You can say, they say, I don't like it. You could say, just squint your eyes and pretend like they're daylilies and it's okay. See what I'm saying? Just trying to substitute stuff. Now, Susan and I spend a lot of time, we go to old cemeteries a lot, looking at cool plants that dead people can grow. Dead people can grow it, I can grow it. Put it in the yard, walk away from it. But one that you'll see right now a lot of is this little bitty plant, the wild onions, but there's a little plant with tiny little flowers and iris look like leaves look like iris. It's called blue-eyed grass. And if you walk around older home sites or go to the cemetery, you'll find blue-eyed grass. It only gets about this big, it flowers, and then as soon as it gets hot, first time you mow the grass, it's gone. See, so you can have this in the late winter and spring, and then just grass the rest of the year. It's called blue-eyed grass. I'll show you a couple of other examples. Maybe y'all have seen this stuff. It's called henbit. It's in the mint family. You can eat it. It doesn't smell like mint, but that's called henbit, and all sorts of pollinators love it. It gets about that big. As soon as it gets hot, it disappears. I know you pull it up, but if you were to mow around a little bit of it, it looks kind of like an orchid if you look at it close. These are examples of what I call not meadow lawn. Everybody talks about having a meadow. Meadows make me think of ticks and snakes. okay? I'm talking about flower lawn, things that only grow about this big, that you can mow over them, that they don't keep it from being a lawn, see? I took this picture day before yesterday. I thought it was in better focus than this, but we were walking around. But this is our neighbor's yard. This is an upscale neighborhood, and they have all of this stuff right here, the clover, the violets, the dandelions, the oxalis, the spring beauty. They have all these plants. And this is the nice neighborhood. The landscape was designed by a landscape architect. As soon as they mow the grass, it's just grass the rest of the year. Just grass. They have a winter, spring meadow, flower lawn, and then just grass. It's possible to do that. We just don't think about that. So I came up with this sign. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we're trying to come up with a way where if you want to get away with weeds in your yard, put this little sign out there and tell people, I'm doing it on purpose. Okay, I got this. I got it. Does that make sense? You're interpreting for the neighbors. Mow a little strip anyway, okay? Put some flamingos out there. Do something to let them know that you're doing it on purpose. But this gives it validity. And so many wonderful plants. People call this a weed. It's our native violet. You can eat it. You can candy it. Everything about it. It's not, the butterflies love it. It only gets them out this big. See, so you can have these in your lawn and then have a summer lawn. It is okay. There's one that has real flat rosettes of leaves and sends up these spikes with these flowers on them. Have y'all seen this before? It's out there. This is a native salvia. It's called lyre leaf sage because the leaves are shaped like lyre. It's an easy plant to grow, and as soon as it gets hot, it's gone. See, so you can have these things in your lawn. The ranunculus, the wild ranunculus with the satiny color flower, dandelions again, you may not like them, but ain't it pretty? Ain't that pretty? Come on, y'all, that's pretty. It's like a zinnia. Can you see she loves me? Poink. She loves me not? Poink. She loves it. It's in the same family as sunflowers and zinnias. But we don't like it because we were told that you're a bad person if you've lost the battle. Well, the battle was invented by people who sell war tools. Anyway, I'm 69 years old, and 11 months ago, I was made a grandfather for the first time. My granddaughter, I call her Peanut. It irritates her mother to no end. Little Peanut. This is the first, and she's only 11 months old. She can just barely do this, you know, or if it wasn't for a big diaper, she'd fall over all the time, you know. But she was out in the yard picking these things. Dandelions will always be associated with her being a child because her parents are lazy enough to not spray them. They're smart enough. But the fact is, she's out there picking dandelions. I think that's a good thing. And if it wasn't for that, they would have nothing but just grass. And what little kid's going to just play around in the grass? They're always looking for stuff. So here's my point. If you want to grow some wildflowers in your lawn, but you want to get along with the neighbors, just mow around a clump of them. Just leave some here and there. You know, put a little wildflower sign there. This is where the Easter bunny lays eggs, by the way. If you don't have this, the Easter bunny can't lay eggs. See, so you can mow around a few clumps here and there, and not only will you feel better than your neighbors, you'll feel smarter and smarter, but also you'll have butterflies and honeybees and stuff like that, and they don't. And the honeybees will have some place to go, and in the neighbor's yard they ain't. See, so that's my point there. We have a lot of wildflowers people like to grow that just simply won't grow here. Any of y'all plant Texas bluebonnets here? You could plant them every year. Plant them in the fall, grow up over the winter, they bloom in the spring, then they die down, just like dandelions. But the problem is, they don't like it here. We live in an acidic, heavy rainfall woodland. These are native to alkaline, thin, no dirt prairies. And they grow all over central part of Texas because that's where they're from. In East Texas, like Texarkana, east of Houston, they don't grow because of different soil. See, we can plant these, but they won't keep coming back because they're not our wildflowers. See, so when you buy a packet of wildflower mixes, you'll get a few that come up and a few that will reseed themselves, but most of them are going to peter out because they're not. So you always want to stick with stuff that we know will do well for us. Yes, sir.
You also have the Indian paintbrush.
Indian paintbrush, yeah. It blooms at the same time. And but they have, but you never see those in Mississippi or Louisiana or Arkansas or Georgia because they're not from here. It's a completely different type of soil and rainfall. So try to grow wildflowers that make sense where we are. And I'm going to talk about this at the end of my talk, but you can always accessorize. You put something like this in that yard, they're not going to know if you mow your grass or not. You know, you can always put something there to throw people off. It's like having a pretty brooch. You know, they don't notice where your skirt is wrinkled or not because they're staring at that. Real quick, I'm not a tree hugger. I tried it. It's just okay. Not that big a deal to me. But I do think it's important for us to give a nod to some things. Y'all know this plant, don't you? It grows along all the fence rows here in Lauderdale County. It won't grow well in the garden because it wants to be in miserable, hard, bad dirt. It wants to be in hard, bad conditions. You put it in a nice flower garden, it gets big, it stops flowering, it peters out. It wants to be treated bad. Okay? But the reason I'm saying that, by the way, I took this picture in England. They grow it everywhere. It's one of their favorites. But it has these wonderful flowers, but it also has these fruit. Did y'all ever eat these maypops? You know, you can eat them if you want to, but get this. If you plant one of these in a yard, something bad's going to happen to us. There's a caterpillar, and whoever designed that thing had a weird sense of humor. Okay, that is a weird-looking critter. There's a butterfly that lays eggs on them, and they eat exclusively on this plant, and they're all out in the woods. You put this in your yard, these things that come in and eat every leaf off your passion flower. It comes back because it sort of likes it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that feels good. Chew this bit. But if you don't have this plant, you're not going to have this caterpillar. If you don't have this caterpillar, you're not going to have the Gulf fritillary butterfly, which is where it comes from. See, you can't have this without the other two. See, so there's a real benefit of growing native plants like that. By the way, I just threw this out. This is something a lot of people don't realize. In Listen Report, oak trees support over 500 different kinds of butterflies and moths. They eat their leaves. Blackberry, willow, birch, poplar, crab, pine is 203. Herbaceous plant, the #1 most wild butterfly and pollinator plant is goldenrod, all the way down to asters, sunflowers, down to violets and geraniums. These are plants we don't think about because they're not sexy. When it comes to having wildlife in your garden, you need to understand that what will kill one will likely kill another. So you got to be very careful if you're applying any kind of pesticides, if you don't have wildflowers or whatever. Everybody knows about honeybees, right? We like honeybees. What if I were to tell you that they're invasive exotics? They're not from here. They're introduced. They spread out in the woods, and they're taken over some of the habitat of our native bees. Oh, but we need butterflies. We need hummingbirds, and we need honeybees, because without those, you can't get almonds. See? But honeybees aren't the only thing out there. We also have little pollinator flies. They look like yellow jackets. They're called hoverflies. And this is a fly. You can tell a fly because a fly's eyes are the biggest part of their head. That's a stupid thing to know. But if they got big head, it's a fly. But we also have these things. You know those things that tunnel into your wood? Those carpenter bees that drive you nuts and they make you feel like your swing's going to fall down? This is what they do. We have all sorts of native bees that don't live in hives. They live in holes in wood. And this bee right here, it's called a blueberry bee. It will pollinate 20 times more than a single honeybee. You can put a little hive of these in your little thing with their nest tubes in your apple orchard. It does 20 times as much pollinating as honeybees will, and it's native. Here's another big one. That's on goldenrod, by the way. If you never looked at goldenrod up close, it's in the same family as sunflowers and zinnias too. And we got this little sweat bee. You know, little sweat bee things? No? It's not a great picture because it's a little bitty thing and I couldn't take a good picture of it. These are all outstanding native pollinators. And look at all the different kinds of native bees we've got. None of them are honeybees, and they can't survive without flowers. Here's where they live. They drill holes in the wood. They lay eggs in there. They stuff a little dead spider in there. They cover it up. Next year they come out. And then they pollinate, they mate, they lay eggs, and they die. They only live for half the summer. You never see those carpenter bees after about June or so, because they're done. Because that's when all of our pollinating gets to be done. You can attract them, by the way, in your garden by drilling holes in wood and putting it out there. I mean, you can even do it where it's kind of cute. You put little straws out there. These straws, see how this is clogged up? Those have the bee in them. Those that come out. Or have a stack of wood in your yard. Just a stack of wood. It looks rough, but you know, if you've got a bunch of a really crappy looking lawn, and that's a crappy looking lawn, and you want to do like that, you put something in between and people think you know what you're doing, and all of a sudden that doesn't look so bad. It's a better perspective. So if you just pile wood up anywhere in your yard, you will have all these native pollinator bees. That's where they live. Any of y'all have logs in your yard on purpose? I think they're pretty. You know, if it wasn't for that log, those ferns would just look okay, but the log gives you something to look at. You with me on that? How about this? You can put a log in your yard and enjoy all the stuff that comes with it. You know, a clump of monkey grass, some heuchera, a log, and all these fungi and all that. It's pretty. And it's in the shade where nothing else will grow. Well, I love these kind of things. Lichens and mosses and Spanish moss. I love those kind of things. So what I did in my yard, when it was too shady, as I planted some hostas and, you know, some shade-loving plants, but I stacked up stumps. Y'all ever heard of a rock garden? This is called a stumpery. I'm not making it up. Google it. It's a stumpery. And I put it out there, and then I put some wire up over it. And in the neighborhood, after the storm last week, when it rained so hard, there's trees in the neighborhood not far from me, and all this stuff blows to the ground, and I drag it home and I put it on my stumpery. And no, it doesn't have cooties, okay? It only has cooties that lays on the ground for a while. Anyway, a little stumpery. I have a wildlife habitat because if you put that sign out there, you can get away with stuff. You know, it's I'm doing this on purpose type, and it's free. Go to wildlifefederation.org, National Wildlife Federation, NWF.org, and fill out a little form saying, I got this and this and this and this, and they'll send you a little sign. And I put this down by the street so my neighbors could see it. By the way, I just added these pictures when we forgot here this morning. A couple of years ago, I rescued a little baby possum. Now that's some overall. That's a little possum. A lot of people don't like possums. They're America's only marsupial. They got a pouch like a kangaroo. Okay, they don't spread diseases. They don't get rabies. They eat ticks. You know, they're just terrific little quiet things, but they're nasty looking. We just don't like the way they look, okay? You ought to see the way some of y'all look with no clothes on, okay? And it's just a nasty looking little creature, but they're sweet. This morning when Susan and I walked in the car, guess who we saw? We call him Pogo. We have Pogo and Petunia, and what we call the other one, Slick. One came into my cabin, and we found it hanging onto a bottle of vodka. Am I making this up? It was a little possum and I took it out and I put it in a bucket and forgot that I'd used a bucket. It was full of muscadine shells because I made some muscadine jelly. And it came out and it had gone around and around this bucket and turned up muscadine holes in the goo, and it was just slick. It was so slick because it couldn't get out. It was just going around and around. So we call him Slick. But anyway, we let him go, and I saw him this morning. Lives under my little tool shed. I'm thinking, I like it. I feel smarter than my neighbors. You put bird seed out to attract birds, that's a good idea. They don't really need it if you have all sorts of stuff out there. But if you put water in your garden, you can have all sorts of wildlife. That's one of the four things. You have food, shelter, nesting place, and water. You put this in your yard, you can have wildlife. You can have bees and butterflies. Bats will drink from that. So anyway, you don't have to have water in your garden. There's so many native plants grow along the edge of the lakes and the creeks and all. They're called emergent zone or wetland plants, or you know, they grow at water's edge. Look at the kind of plants that you can have in a garden, shapes and textures of flowers that all grow in areas that stay wet part of the year. And you probably got a place stays wet for 3 or 4 days after rain and then dries up. These plants will grow there. Doesn't take much. Here's one called Blue Star or Amsonia. Grows in ditches in Mississippi. Not on the side of the ditch, all the way down in the ditch. We have Stokes Aster. Some people call it Stokesia. Big pom-pom flower. This is what the flowers look like. That's a big flower. It grows in ditches in Lauderdale County. The reason you don't see it because you drive too fast. But it's down there. And they're wonderful native pollinator plants. We have a plant that blooms in the fall that's called Cardinal Flower. It's native to Lauderdale County. It grows down in low wet areas. See, so if you've got a place that's hard to grow other plants, we got some beautiful native plants to grow there. How about this? You go up in the Delta where it's really flat and stays swampy part of the time, you'll see a lot of this. This is our native Hymenocallis, and it grows really well in low wet areas. It grows in a water garden too. And then even some of our pitcher plants that grow in low wet areas, you grow in your garden by just filling something up with mud. No drainage hole, just mud. And by the way, y'all see this? It's called ladies' tresses. It grows along our interstates. It's an orchid. It's all over Mississippi. You don't notice it because it's just going by too fast. We have native orchids that grow in low wet areas in Mississippi. And it's easy to grow at home too. So anyway, if you want to have a little water garden, all it takes is something that has water and some plants in it. This is a horsetail. It's been here for millions of years. You'll have dragonflies too. Can't have dragonflies without water. Can't have them. And they fly with their 6 legs out like a basket, and they grab mosquitoes and eat them while they fly. They eat mosquitoes on the wing. By the way, purple martins don't eat mosquitoes. They've never eaten. Cut them open all day long. There's no mosquitoes, and they're full of dragonflies and butterflies, big, slow, stupid things. Purple martins need a place to stay, but they don't eat mosquitoes. Dragonflies do. We found this. We were stealing some daffodils from old homes. We were liberating some daffodils from an old home site, and we had permission. Did we have permission? Okay, we just want to let you know. And I found him, so I brought him home in a bottle, and he's just happy as he could be in my yard. I mean, you can't have that without a little moisture, a little tree frog. And this is all the water you need. You don't have to worry about mosquitoes. If you got a bird bath, dump it out, fill it back up. Forget mosquitoes. You got mosquitoes anyway. But if you have just a little bit of water, you'll have honeybees, butterflies. You'll have all sorts of little things that need a little sip of water in your garden. Our official state butterfly, yes, sir.
On your water element, does it have to be still water? Can it be a fountain with?
If you can't, it's a good question. You can't really have many plants with splashy water. So if you have a splashy water, in one of mine I've got the little water thing, but I've floated a piece of driftwood, so it splashes over there, but it's not over here. A little piece of floating driftwood. And honeybees and butterflies and all, they'll be around the edge. And if you put a shallow tray with some gravel in it, the gravel stays moist, and butterflies will land on that because they got that little tongue thing. See, so it's something that's moist, but they can just stay on. What time is it getting to be? Anybody know what time it is? 10:35. 10:35. We got time to go a little bit longer? Okay, good. Because we want to talk about wildflowers now. This is wildflowers. They're not all wildflowers. Yeah, they are. This is, oops, come on, Felder, don't do that. Relax. Come back. Go back 2 more. There we go. Right there. Purple coneflower, native. Oak leaf hydrangea, native. Butterfly weed, native. Iris, not native, but isn't it pretty? Coreopsis. These are all native plants except for that. The reason I'm mentioning that, because you can have a nice little combination of plants and have butterflies. You don't have to attract butterflies, just plant nice stuff, and you'll have butterflies. Butterflies will come. And this is a monarch butterfly, and it's on a what they call tropical milkweed. Now I have to diverge with my friends here. This is our native milkweed. Y'all have seen it, right? Good for monarchs. Well, this is tropical milkweed. It blooms all summer and fall. It gets about this tall. It's pretty in the yard. It's a great, tough, durable, low maintenance, drought tolerant, butterfly friendly, not native plant. It's native to Mexico. And they say don't plant it here because it'll kill your monarchs. Have any of y'all heard that before? because along the Rio Grande, this stuff is real thick and perennial. It blooms all year, and the monarchs stick there. Instead of going on to Mexico, they stay there, and problems build up. It's like too many people in the elevator. After a while, somebody's going to pass wind, and you're going to feel like everybody's getting really bad trouble here. Okay, that's what's happening. They get stuck at this tropical milkweed, and they don't keep going further, and problems build up. That doesn't happen in Mississippi because it dies down, and the butterflies move on. So when you read tropical milkweed is bad for butterflies, they don't mean in Mississippi. They just mean along the Rio Grande. But then I could tell you that. They say, don't plant this. This is my favorite milkweed. And this is what it looks like in the garden. And loaded with caterpillars and everything. And we have some other milkweeds. This is called swamp milkweed. This grows in Mississippi. You're not going to see it because it's too far out. You're going to get your feet wet getting to it. But this grows all over Mississippi in low wet areas called swamp milkweed. And it is a terrific, terrific native pollinator plant. Why don't we grow it? Because they don't sell it in garden centers, because nobody's coming in and asking for it. But you can get this online, tropical milkweed. It's a hardy perennial, grows a long, long time. We also have hover moths, the little clear-winged moths that hover around. We've got the little skippers that fly like this. They're not butterflies or moths. There's butterflies, moths, and skippers. And they fly like this. They're really, really good pollinators. Ooh. Boy, that gave me goosebumps. I don't like spiders, but I kind of like that. Ain't she pretty? And she's eating things that are pollinating the flowers. But then birds come along and eat her. See, so, you can't have birds without spiders and caterpillars and stuff. And somebody sent me this picture who lives out from Noxapater last week. This is in my garden. Have any of y'all ever seen this snail before in your yard? It's native to Mississippi. And it's called Rosy wolf snail, like the dog wolf. Rosy wolf snail. The reason I'm showing this, people think snails and slugs are bad. This is a native snail that only does one thing. It eats other snails. It doesn't eat plants at all. It's a predator snail. It can, even though it doesn't have a foot, it can outrun other snails. It flat foot catches up other snails and eats them. And it's our native snail. I don't know why I show that. So a lot of people think all snails are bad. But it's a cool thing. And they will live for 2 years. So you'll have little shells around there. Y'all know these things? They think, hey, look at my dewlap. If you pick it up, it'll bite you. Did y'all know that? Did you know you can hang it off your earlobes? Because they're not poisonous. They don't have teeth. So this is the kind of thing with Susan. We've got one in the yard. She comes out there and she said, come on down. And the thing comes down and looks at, I think they have a thing, because this one comes to her and, blinks his eyes at her, Am I making this up, Susan? She has one that trusts her. She, of course, look at the kind of dress she wears. She looks like a flower. I want to jump on that. What's that? Never mind. Now, before we look at some native plants real quick, I want to mention this. I do live in England for half the year for the past, 12 years or so. We do a lot of walking. I have a little garden. I grow English peas and stuff like that, little tiny little garden. But I do a lot of walk. Susan and I both do a lot of walking across the moors. These are little stepping stones. You can walk anywhere in England. There's a footpath. There's 2 paths to get anywhere. And people walk all the time out there. And you find stuff like this. Can we grow lupins like this in Mississippi? No, because they're England. It's a different climate. We have our own kind of lupins. Texas bluebonnet, by the way, is a lupin. See, so there's all different kind of lupins, but you can't find stuff like this just out in the wild in Mississippi. But when we were walking around last July, just walking down these footpaths, I collected this handful of flowers, just walking, and we're talking about, besides about a 10-minute walk within her village, less than half a mile from where we live, which is near town center, we find stuff like this. And they have footpaths around it because they celebrate it and all the pollinators. We also found all these different kind of grasses. See? So we can have that here except for snakes and ticks and red bugs. We have to have wide paths because of that kind of stuff. But I see wildflowers from Mississippi and goldenrod, phlox, more goldenrod, all over England. I see it everywhere. Every plant in this picture is native to Lauderdale County, Mississippi. This is in England. Because they don't see them as wildflowers or weeds. They see them as good garden plants. They don't think wildflowers. They think that's a cool plant and it blooms a long time. A designer friend of mine said, you Americans poo-poo your asters and your goldenrods, and you come over to England and take pictures of your asters and your goldenrods. See, because they don't see them as weeds. They don't have them along the roadside. They get bored with stuff like those lupins. They don't grow lupins in their yard because it's just a weed out there. See, so every place has a different perspective. I took this picture last summer at the opening of the Royal Horticultural Society's newest botanic garden. They got, what, 5 or 6, I don't remember, 5 or 6. First one they've opened in 70 years. We went to visit it, and of course it was raining that day. Every plant in this picture is native to Lauderdale County, Mississippi. This is the brand new RHS Bridgewater Botanic Garden. And every plant in this picture is native to Lauderdale County. And you go to the garden center and they have all this thing called summer color and scent. Every plant in here is native to Lauderdale County, Mississippi. You don't see that in garden centers because we wanted to buy azaleas and periwinkles. Over there, they want to buy our stuff because it's really cool plants. Give you a real quick comparison. This is the picture we took last summer, last July, in Bridgewater Botanic Garden. Here's what it looked like this summer, and we went back in, was it December or January? Sometime in the winter. We took the same picture, same angle. Here's what it looked like in the wintertime. Still looks okay. Brown is a color too. Let's don't forget that. Here's one of their greenhouses. Every plant in here native to Lauderdale County. In the winter, it looks like this because they leave it up there because that's where a lot of insects overwinter in that kind of debris. Here's one with Liatris, Phlox, tall sunflower, all native to Lauderdale County. Oh, and they also had sumac. Y'all know sumac? They all use it because it's a cool plant. Here, you don't want that. It comes up, you just pull it up, okay? It's like shaving, you know? You got to take care of some plants. This is what it looked like in the summertime, same garden in the wintertime. Our native sumac, see? They appreciate things, but we tend to overlook them because they don't sell them in garden centers because it's not an English plant. Does that make sense? And here's what, I want to go back. I'm hoping to get there early enough this fall or summer take a picture of theirs when it's got the fall color. Sumac is among the best fall colors we have here. We have great plants for texture like our native palmetto. You can have wildflowers outside a rest area. That's where they, instead of daylilies, they have this. They just use them as plant. Oops. Y'all know spring phlox is in bloom out in the woods all the time. You can work it in any kind of landscape. Come on, Felder, stop pushing that. You know, remember Dr. Dirt? He was my co-host for a long time. Here's what his yard looked like. All these sunflowers here are native swamp sunflower in the fall. We have a friend named Susie Cranston in Jackson. She has all these birdhouses, but she got that same sunflower because it's a good-looking plant. We've got another neighbor named Bill who's got this agave right here, and when it blooms, it is completely solid with hummingbirds. There are no hummingbirds in the neighborhood. When it blooms, boom, there the hummingbirds are. And hot, dry places like a Walmart parking lot, all native plants, textures. Wintertime, we have winter, spring, summer, fall. You know, y'all see this in the woods. Look what it looks like in the yard. It's our native redbud. We don't think of it as a native plant, though. We think it is a flowering tree. And that's where all these things fit in. Oak leaf hydrangea grows all out in the woods. You put it in your yard. I know it's not that pink or purple one, but it's a pretty plant, and it's a good native plant. We have summertime things like the Turk's turban, which is a terrific hummingbird plant. Red buds for fall color. If they never bloom, they look good in the fall. We forget that native plants have got multiple uses. And even in the wintertime, our native deciduous holly called possum haw looks good. Well, we took this picture a 3 weeks ago. Y'all know this? What do you call it? No, not the structure, the plant. Thanks, Mom. A lot of people call it Carolina jasmine or yeller jasmine. It's Carolina jessamine, and guess what? It's a native plant. It supports our native bees, but when it blooms, honeybees go to it, and the first entire brood of honeybees dies. This poisons honeybees. But they're not from here, so who cares? I'm being sarcastic. Fact is, this is a native plant that blooms for our native pollinators, and honeybees, it kills their first brood. They recover, but I just want to let you know weird stuff like that. This is a vine in my yard that blooms a little later called cross vine. Y'all know the honeysuckle that I was talking about earlier? We have a native honeysuckle. This is all out in the woods. It's a native honeysuckle. And hummingbirds and moths are the only thing that get their tongue up in there. And it's and it's not invasive like the other one. By the way, this is called Virginia creeper. This is poison ivy. They're both native. They grow side by side. A lot of people call that poison ivy. That's poison ivy. That's Virginia creeper. They're both good native plants. But look at the fall color poison ivy. Does that make it worth growing in the yard or what? No? You know, we got to make value calls here. Got to make value calls. It's pretty. And believe it or not, there's a lot of insects that feed on it. And the birds eat the berries. That's how it spreads. But fall color, not good enough. Excuse me, that's out of here. But it is a native plant. When people say native plants are great, I'm thinking poison ivy is a native plant. Prickly pear cactus, which is edible, nopalitos. You can eat but look at the fruit they have in the fall. They're called not pears. What are they called? They're called tunas, little tunas. You can buy them in all the Hispanic stores here. Tunas, and they're perfectly edible. Native muscadines that have fruit in the fall. Y'all know American beautyberry? Have y'all seen this? It's all out in the woods. It's got little clusters of pink flowers that butterflies love. You don't see them because they're in the big leaves. And it has these clusters of magenta berries, which are perfectly edible. They just taste terrible. They're real bland. It's like eating dry oatmeal, okay? But the Native Americans used it. They would mix nuts and berries, some of these for filler, and they'd melt like squirrel fat around it and make this stuff called pemmican. And this is the filler. This is the crackers to their bowl of chili. And the leaves, you take those leaves and you rub them up and put them on there, one of the best mosquito repellents you can have. It's a great natural mosquito if you rub it on there. American beautyberry. But remember when I said earlier that China and Mississippi used to be side by side? This is our native beautyberry, and that's theirs. They both have beautyberries. Theirs is smaller. It fits in the landscape better. It's not as showy. That fits better, so I would prefer that over the one from here, because the one from here gets this big. This one stays like this. See? This is what the Chinese beautyberry looks like. Native Yopon holly. We were driving around yesterday after giving a broadcast from here at the Max, just right off the street, right across from the college downtown. This is a weeping Yopon. It's a native tree. I had to get rid of my crepe myrtle because of the crepe myrtle bark scale. I put one of these in front of my picture with it because I think it's pretty, and it's native plant. And you can do goofy stuff to them too. You know, once crepe myrtles are all gone because crepe myrtle bark scale is, wiping, y'all know about that? The black stuff on crepe myrtles, it's wiped them out. Anyway, we can replace it with Yopons, and then instead of crepe murder, it's going to be yoke murder. But, it doesn't hurt to do a plant like that. People say, yeah, you shouldn't do this, it's not natural. I had a lady tell me pruning plants are not natural. But she had shaved her eyebrows off and put them in a different part of her face. And she was talking about not natural. I'm thinking, lower your eyebrows tomorrow morning. Anyway, pruning is okay, whether it's native or not. It's okay. There's the red Buckeye I was talking about earlier. Dogwoods are hard to grow. This is called Grancy Graybeard. And have any of y'all have this? Grandpa Graybeard. This is a native plant, and it outshines dogwoods. It blooms a couple of weeks later, and it will grow anywhere. Why can't you buy it? Because people ask for dogwoods, which die. I'm just saying, we have some good substitutes for even our native plants. This is one that's out in the woods. Some of you may remember this childhood. It blooms in the woods. It's a shrub. It smells kind of cinnamony. It's called sweet shrub. It's a native woodland plant, sweet shrub. What do y'all call this? Wild honeysuckle? This is our native azalea. You see it all along the roadside. We saw some coming in from Jackson this morning. It's all on the roadside. It's a native azalea, and it smells so good. It's such a nice fragrant plant. I want to make sure that, I'll run out of time here. But y'all have seen that. How about this? Every one of those is native to Mississippi. It's not an azalea. It's a native azalea. And they're real fragrant. They're really tough. They like it in shade, but they'll grow in the full sun. But have y'all seen these in people's yards? Why don't they sell them at garden centers? Because we come in looking for those big evergreen ones that come from Asia. But this is a terrific native plant, and hummingbirds love them. Unfortunately, I had to take that picture in a garden in England because the only time you see them here is in old ladies' yards. And by the way, old lady is not an age or gender thing. It's a style, okay? Anyway, this is a terrific plant. The flowers are edible. You can dip them in batter and fry them like pancakes, or you can let them turn into berries and make wine out of them. This is elderberry, our native elderberry. It's a great native plant. We don't plant them because they don't sell them because they're not a peach tree, and peach trees die, and you come back and buy another one. So what are they going to want to sell more of? Peach trees. For, Yes. We actually have several. We have, I can't remember what county they're in. We have a nursery here. I want to say it's down around Jones County. They specialize in native plants. I'm just drawing a total blank but they have a lot of them. And also the master gardeners almost always have stuff like this at their plant sales. And Crosby Arboretum and Strawberry Plains up in North Mid, they have. Am I out of time? You just want to tell me something?
So there's a program that's downstairs, but they had to get moved inside.
Okay, we need to go quick because some people are going to get loud. Trilliums grow in the woods. This is a plant called obedience. It's a native woodland plant. Physostees. Any of y'all grow obedience? You plant it and it runs, and you have lots to share with other people. It's called obedient because make the flowers pointing in whatever direction they stay that way. It's a stupid reason to name a plant. Y'all know purple coneflowers. Well, we have lots of different kinds of purple coneflowers, not just purple coneflowers, which is pink to begin with. See, so we've taken native plants and taken them where horticulture make cultivars, interesting varieties. This is the night evening primrose. They open up about the same time, 4 o'clock. We see it a lot in British gardens. It grows all over Mississippi. We don't see them because it doesn't open till almost dark. This is a friend of ours who lives around the corner from me in Jackson. She has a cottage-style garden. She's one of the gardeners who's featured in Maverick Gardeners, Jenny Nelson. And look at the flowers she grows in her garden, including goldenrod. She's from Jamaica. She doesn't know it's a weed. She grows it because it's a pretty flower. Good for butterflies, good for pollinators. This is a goldenrod at the Chorley Flower Show in Lancashire, England. Chorley Flower Show. I got a blue ribbon for the goldenrod. And then there's all different kinds of goldenrod. This only gets about not quite waist high. It's called fireworks. A lot of different kinds of goldenrods. And that's as big as this one ever gets. See, so we have good plants that aren't the wild, weedy ones that you can use in your landscape. Here's goldenrod in an English garden. So my point is, even goldenrod, what a lot of people say, by the way, it doesn't cause allergy. It's the same family as sunflowers, as in you can stick it up your nose. It will not make you sneeze. It's got heavy pollen that has to be carried by insects. It's the ragweed that blows in the wind that makes us sneeze, and we blame the goldenrod. It's a terrific cut flower. It's edible. It is the top pollinator perennial for Mississippi. And we don't grow it because it goes crazy. Well, I've already shown you some of the smaller varieties. I showed you that picture earlier. Now, got a little short section at the end on how to get away with these plants. I've shown you probably about half the slides I could of good landscape quality Mississippi native plants. There's so many. And again, if you want a list of them, shoot me an email. It's free. I send it right to you. But if you want to get away with native plants in your yard, you need to make the neighbors think that A, it's not a native plant, it's just a pretty flower, okay? And you can't fool them with goldenrod because they know that's a weed. And B, you're doing it on purpose. So, and it includes having a neat little mowed area or some mowing strips, having some regular plants in with it, you know, so it's not just a bunch of weeds. You know, these are little tricks. Another way is to get away with it is to have credentials. Either have somebody like me come by, waving my arms around, making recommendations so your neighbors see that you're getting professional help, you know. Leave your doctor's pen with their doctor's name in a prominent place so they know you're getting help. Or get a wildlife habitat sign and put out there, something that lets the neighbors know that you're doing this on purpose. That's important. It's called social cues. Or put your wagon wheel out there and let stuff come up around it, because people appreciate accessory. Native Natural Science Museum has a fence around it, but they also interpret the sumac and all these native plants. They have a nice little fence. If you just put a piece of split rail fence out in your pasture and mow up to it on one side and let everything grow on the other side, people think you're doing it on purpose. It creates that scene. This is a nice little collection of flowers. It needs a bird bath. All it needs are a rock or something. Let's take a look at this. You could put a tall tree, you can mix plants up for that same effect. An old stump. You can drag it up and put it out there. Landscape architect friend of mine named Rick Griffin told me one time, and keep in mind that I know what I'm doing. I care what my neighbors think. It just doesn't matter. You know, I'm just am what I am. I'm not going to mow grass because I had to do that as a kid. So I put a bunch of wildflowers in my front yard, and it looked okay to me. Horticulturist, Native Plant Society, I get it. It's great. Woo! Neighbors didn't like it. It looked trashy. And Rick said, put a piece of split rail fence in it. I said, nah, that's cynical. Disney-esque is what I said. He said, just give it a try. So against my better judgment, against my ego and everything, I put a piece of split rail fence in my wildflowers in the front yard, and instantly it made the cover of Southern Living magazine. Okay? I learned the power of social cues. Okay? And to take it a step further, this is the picture, and I don't remember where we saw this, Susan. It's a really fancy garden down in South England. Blooms of Bressingham. They're famous in the horticulture world. This is in their garden in England. Every plant in here is native to Lauderdale County, Mississippi. But it looks normal because they got grass on one side and they got a hard feature. That's how you get away with these things. You give social cues. It could be anything. Anything at all. Little rabbit statues. That's a really crappy looking scene if you take the statue away. Put the statue out there, it looks like they're doing it on purpose, and it works. It works. Anyway, you get the idea on that. You can put a scare. I had a young lady, she's doing a landscape project up at the, how you say it, Okatibi? She was saying, I can't read this. We don't have OKA in anything in England. OKA. I said, well, it's the Native American thing. Don't worry about it. Anyway, she's doing a landscape project out there. She's planting a bunch of wildflower seeds. I'm saying it's going to look like a bunch of weeds. I said, put 3 sticks out there with a pretty birdhouse on each one, or drag an old log up, plant around that, and people think you know what you're doing. It never occurred. She wanted to plant wildflowers. I wanted her to have a successful turnout. Anyway, bottom line is, you can get $1 million. This is at the National Wildflower Research Center in Texas. They put stuff out there because they know that it's important to have that idea. Anything you put out in a bunch of weeds that looks like you're doing it on purpose, you can get away with it. We walk a lot through English gardens. This is somebody's backyard. It's on the way back from our pub, 3.5 miles each way. And it's beautiful the whole way. But we'll walk along and look over the back fence, and you can't see, but there's a little path going to this. But from their house, they look out and they see this. And that gives it order. It gives it sense. It makes sense. It's not a bunch of weeds all of a sudden. It's a garden. So my main point in all this is native plants like this Phlox and that Monarda, which is they're both great butterfly plants, a great native plant. You put them something like a Dandelion with it, and people think you know what you're doing. So this is the first time, by the way, that I've given this talk. The reason I've sort of dragged it out, see where I need to drop some stuff because some of y'all didn't get it. Or else I thought you would get it and it wasn't a point worth making. But I think I've tried to get across this idea that native plants in the landscape aren't always wildflowers, and not all wildflowers are weeds, but some native wildflowers can be really weedy. If you want to get away with this, we have a lot to choose from, a lot. And you can have an entire English garden with nothing but weeds from Mississippi, as long as you put a stack of sticks out there to make people think you know what you're doing, and a little sign. So this is my next and last slide. You can't expect to have butterflies and me have all the caterpillars, okay? Put a few plants out there. Let's make it a team effort. And to me, one of the most promising things to come along, there's a new movement they call No Mow May. It'll have to be April here. Up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, they have people sign up for a sign put in their yard where in May we're not going to mow our lawns. We're going to have wildflowers come up. And we're going to do this as a group. It's called No Mow May. And they had twice as many people sign up as they thought they would. And all of a sudden, they measured, these are scientists doing this, and they're working on this in Mississippi State, working with North Carolina, some other states, to come up with a way to make it where it's susceptible, have at least a part of your lawn with the kind of stuff you're seeing out there right now, leave it alone. You know, part meadow, part flowers, part lawn. And we're trying to make it where it's okay. And the only way we can do that is for people to stop thinking that clover is a weed and see it as a great little low-growing native plant covered with butterflies and bees. See? So that's the whole idea. Things are changing societally, and weed and feed is on the way out. No mow May doesn't mean no mow at all. It just means put it off another couple of weeks. Mow around that clump of clover. Enjoy things. Thank y'all so much for coming out this morning. Oh, well, felderrushing.blog. If you want to email me about anything at all. Mississippi Gardening Facebook. Bunch of real weird people there, but they're honest gardeners. Any of y'all on this? You know what I'm saying. Between me and Nate, he's saying, don't plant that, it's not from around here. I'm saying, shut up, I like it. And also MPB, Mississippi Public Broadcasting. I've got a program on Fridays and Saturdays. Deeply appreciate the Max for having us out here today. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Stacy, thank you.
Yeah, we love having you, and I've already subscribed, so. But there were a few people that brought plants, so I wanted to make sure that we were able to do the plant swap.
Yes, we have. This is a plant that's called, what'd you call it? Who brought it? What do you call it? Mother millions or mother thousands. This is a weird little plant that grows little bitty plants at the edges of the leaves and they drop everywhere. So she's not really just sharing something, she's giving you a weed. But if you know, it's got little bitty plants on the end, and you can also break an entire leaf off, whoever gets this, and lay it on the ground, it's going to grow new plants. Am I right on that? Cool plant. What's that? Outside? No. It will, yeah. And then here's a little ground cover that's called golden moneywort. It looks like a weed. Well, it is a weed, but it's a pretty weed. And it's a nice little ground cover called golden moneywort. We got a red salvia, which really does best in a light shade, but it's a good butterfly plant. And then orange daylily. And a white iris. There's orange daylily in here.
That's what all of them said. Yeah.
Anyway, there's some orange daylily over here if anybody wants some of it. And then I brought, in my swap, I brought some of these. There may be enough to share. This is called jack bean. The beans are about this long. It looks like kudzu. It dies in the winter but grows on. And it's an incredible, big, heavy bean type. Big beans. Yeah, big leaves look like, but it dies in the winter, so it's not kudzu. But it's a terrific ornamental plant. It makes beans that long with these great big seeds in there, and there's enough there to share. Anyway, thank you again so much. I appreciate it. Well, we're gonna do this. People, if you brought a plant,
Apologies to everyone that we have to kind of cut this short. One of the next programs, which is some kids are going to be performing. I can't remember what they're performing.
okay, there's 5 things here.
It says 1 of these two, but what are they performing? Oh. Well, they're support the kids, but they're going to be in the Hall of Fame. They got moved inside, so apologies for
Whoever
this.
brought a plant, grab one of those numbers, and that's the plant you get whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, share it with other people. The idea isn't to get a plant or get a plant. It's to mix weird people and weird plants up. Okay.